Good morning. My name is Robert Schulman, and I'm a prosthetist. A prosto what, I can hear you all thinking? I promise you, I did not come here today to talk about how I sell my body. But rather, I'm a prosthetist, which means I make artificial limbs for people with limb loss or amputees. When you go to school to become a prosthetist, you learn how to make these technologically advanced devices and how to be an engineer. So when I graduated, I put on my engineering hat and I was ready to conquer the world. I remember my very first patient, woman in her 60s, lost her leg due to diabetes, and she sat there petrified with her husband. So, not knowing what to expect. So I made her a prosthesis, I crossed my fingers, and I put it on her. And she stood up, and she took a deep breath, and she walked up those parallel bars and back. And when she sat down, her and her husband, they hugged and they cried tears of happy joy, knowing that life was going to go on and everything was going to be okay. It was at this moment I realized that my job was a lot more than being an engineer. I had the ability to change people's lives. I grew up here in Long Island in a small house with my single mother, my sister, and my grandparents. My grandparents played a huge influence on my life as they helped raise my sister and I. My grandmother, she was a saint. Not a bad word came out of her mouth, and she lived life with an extremely high moral compass. I remember a time we were in a Friendly's ice cream restaurant, and there was a payphone inside. And as a kid, I reached inside the change return, and there was a bunch of quarters inside. I was all excited as a kid, I just found this money. But my grandmother, she looked at me and she said, "Rob, that money belongs to the last person who uses payphone." So we went up to the front counter, and we asked if they would hold on to this money for the returning people. This act of kindness, which kind of seemed silly to me at the time, unknowingly became the framework of how I was to live my life. You see, kindness is not something you learn from a lesson book or a manual. It's shown through examples of putting others before yourself. My grandmother had a favorite phrase, which was to treat others the way you would want to be treated. If you look up in a dictionary the definition of kindness, you see many words that all relate to how we treat others. So when I raised my two children, I taught them how to treat others and be kind towards others. And as I got older and I had more time to do some volunteering, I found out about Camp No Limits. Camp No Limits is a camp for children with limb loss and their families. I didn't know what to expect, but all I knew was that I'm a prosthetist, this is a camp for children with limb loss, I got plenty to offer. So I attended an occupational therapy group, and there were older children with upper extremity limb loss teaching younger children with upper extremity limb loss how to tie their shoes with one hand. I sat down with the kids, and they said, "Rob, put one hand behind your back and try tying your shoe," which I challenge you all to do when you go home. I sat there, I couldn't do it. Tried and tried, and they showed me some of the methods of how to tie your shoe with one hand, and I finally got it. Later on that day, I was sitting in a support group for parents of these children with limb loss. And I was listening to all the struggles and the issues that these children and the families go through living life with limb loss. And I started thinking that I could be so much better of a prosthetist if I looked past the carbon fiber and the titanium. And I realized that these children had not only goals and aspirations, but they had fears, anxieties, comforts, and lots of other emotions that make us all so unique. In a setting that I thought I had so much to offer, I became a student. And years later, as I continued to go around the country with Camp No Limits, I continue to be the student to these amazing children. Around the same time frame, I was approached by a nonprofit organization called the Living Water Children's Fund about a boy living in Tanzania, Africa. Joseph was born missing both of his arms and one of his legs. In Joseph's culture, if you're not able to hunt and help the family out functionally, then you are thought of as useless. Useless. So Joseph's family put him out in the desert one night for the hyenas to eat. Thankfully, the local orphanage heard about this and rescued him, brought him back to the orphanage where he's still living today. So the nonprofit organization brought him here to New York for me to make him 3 prostheses, which we did, and he did amazing. This little guy with his leg, he was running around the gym, playing soccer, he was scootering up and down the hallway, and with his new arms, he was showing everyone how he could get dressed and put a hat on his head, and he discovered Dunkin' Donut munchkins, which he was able to feed himself with his new arm, his new favorite dessert. And a local news reporter came to do a story on him. And she said, "Joseph, what are you going to do with your new prostheses now?" And he looked up confidently at her and he said, "I want to be a pilot." It felt great knowing that we just changed this boy's life. But I couldn't help but to think how many other children out there that don't have limbs are thought of as useless, all because they don't have a prosthesis. You see, here in the United States, we have the ability to get anything we need and want. If you have a cold in the middle of the night, you could run out to the pharmacy that's 24 hours and get yourself some cold medicine. If you're at home and you're hungry, you can go on your app. You don't even have to leave your house and have a burger and fries delivered to you in a matter of minutes. And if you're missing a limb, you can meet with a prosthetist and a doctor, and you will obtain a prosthesis. This is a luxury that we all, including myself, take for granted. In many areas around the world, they live a very basic and simple life, where they have very little, close to nothing. So, I really learned this when I went to Haiti, and I was able to make prostheses for the children who lost limbs from the earthquake in 2010. This trip changed my life in many ways I was not expecting. When you watch an infomercial in the middle of the night and you see these starving children, it's very sad and it makes you want to help them and donate money. But to experience this in real life was something I wasn't prepared for. A mother was holding her 2-year-old child, and the child was wearing ripped, dirty clothing, belly swollen from malnutrition, limbs hanging by her side, no energy. And this woman, the mother, was crying, speaking in Creole, walking towards me, and put the baby in my arms and ran away. And I just sat there holding this baby with tears in my eyes. And I asked the interpreter, I said, "What was the mother saying when she ran off?" And she was asking me to give her baby a life as her baby was going to die. That trip, I also made a prosthesis for a 13-year-old girl. And she was sitting, one of the days of the fitting, she was sitting there holding her stomach as if in pain. I asked the interpreter, I said, "Can you ask her, is she okay? Does she need some medicine for a stomach ache or something?" And when he asked her, she responded with, "I'm hungry, I haven't eaten in 3 days." We gave her granola bars, I gave her lunch, but the reality is that she was going to be hungry within a day or two. That trip, I made 7 prostheses, which I felt wonderful about. I felt great about. But I knew that there was so much more we could do. You see, there are so few prosthetists in this world and such an overwhelming need for prosthetic care. There are literally tens and thousands of children with limb loss around the world who do not have a prosthesis. Myself being one of the people who knows how to make a prosthesis, I feel a sense of duty and obligation to these children. I mean, how could I not help? So I've been returning to Haiti every year, making prostheses for these amazing children, and have had some of the most memorable experiences, as their gratitude is amazing. They know that if I wasn't able to make them that prosthesis, they wouldn't have one. A mother of a girl that I just made a prosthesis for, she came up to me after I'd just given her daughter a leg, and she said, "I want to give you a gift for what you have just given my daughter, but I'm poor, I have nothing." So she explained how she took an old sweater that was ripped, and she unraveled the threads, and she uses the threads to make a bracelet for me. And she said, "I want you to envision that this bracelet is made with threads of gold, as this is the gratitude that we have for what you've done for our daughter." This bracelet's still my favorite piece of jewelry. So last year, I formed a nonprofit organization, newly renamed the LimbKind Foundation. We make prostheses for children with limb loss around the world, for children living in areas of severe poverty, areas of conflict, and and areas where they just can't afford the prosthetic care. This past February, I took a team of 8 prosthetists and amputee mentors back with me to Haiti, but this time we made 20 prostheses, and it was just an amazing trip. This coming September, we'll be going to the Philippines, where we'll be making prostheses for children there. Our goal is to make prostheses for children around the world, adding one country to our map every year, helping as many that we can. I feel very fortunate to have had a mother and a grandmother like mine, who lived a life of kindness and compassion, showing by example that kindness speaks volumes and is contagious. All it takes is a small shift in your mindset, allowing kindness to sit on the sidelines of your daily day. Life is complicated and sometimes overwhelming. Lots of decisions, lots of choices. But in the words of Joan Ratner, my grandmother, if you treat others the way you would want to be treated, you're going to be on the right track. Thank you very much, and be kind.